Welcome back, viewers. Welcome back to another episode. So, this is episode 21, and today I'll tell you about moving to Bombay, my first impressions of Bombay. So, in those days, it was called Bombay, it was not called Mumbai. It was more than 2 decades before the name would change. So, the first thing that I remember about being in Bombay is um, where my mom was standing in this apartment and looking around and telling dad, okay, I think I can live here. It is bright enough, the windows are large enough. So, what happens is Godrej has, like I mentioned in the previous episode, they have a lot of property in Vikhroli, and it is divided into east and west. So in the east, they have a colony called Creekside, which is near the creek. There's this lovely creek which has these mangroves and exotic birds that come over there, the flamingos and ostriches and all of those. So that apartments around that side are called Creekside apartments. Then towards the station, there are different kind of apartments. Those were called station side apartments. Then another side towards the railway, there was a overhead railway bridge. So the apartments towards the houses, those were not apartments. The houses towards that side were called Kendra apartments. So basically, the previous generation of Godrej is the ones who started the company, and even the next generation, I think, they were very interested in integrating into the culture. So they used like Sanskritized terms for everything. The school that they had in the Godrej complex, it was called the Udayachal school, like the rising sun of knowledge. And then the club, I guess, where they had table tennis and all these games, and then they had a doctor clinic and all of that. So they called it the Kendra, like the Krida Kendra, where they had all these games and I think karate classes and all of that. So the houses near that side were called the Kendra side houses, and I loved them. They had a garden at the back and the front, and they had a front door and a back door, and I found them absolutely beautiful. Those people had trees growing in their yards. They had like a garden in the front, a garden in the back. Like, I found it extremely beautiful. So these were the colonies in the east for their employees. Then on the west, they had the hillside quarters. We had hills around our houses. So in hillside, the sections were divided into Godrej and boys housing. So when you entered the gate of the Godrej colony, the first thing you would see would be all the Godrej and Boys houses. Now, of course, the companies have different names. So at that time, the two companies were called Godrej Soaps and Godrej and Boys. So my dad had been hired by for Godrej Soaps. So initially, when you entered the gate, all of the Godrej and Boys, there were lots of apartments. So you kept on going ahead, and then there was a something that we called the Nalla. So the Nalla was basically, I think there was a stream, or I don't know if it was a gutter, but it was an open thing, and there was a bridge across it. So once you crossed that Nalla, then you came across the four soaps buildings. There were just four buildings for Godrej Soaps employees over there, and that first building was called the Managers Building. So that was SPC1, that was the numbering convention. Ours were SPE, and the Managers Building was SPC. I guess that depended on the layout. So these were 2 bedroom apartments, and we found them very fancy. Even the rooms were bigger than our rooms, and they had these fancy style balconies different from ours. And so ahead of the Managers Building was our building, and we got an apartment on the third floor. So it was a lovely open space, like there was lots of open space between the four buildings, and there were trees growing over there. So there were a lot of mango trees. So I spent many pleasant times walking around under the mango tree, searching for little fallen raw mangoes that we used to collect and we used to eat. So that was good fun. We enjoyed doing that. Then between our building and the manager's building was a jamun tree. Now, I don't know what you would call the jamun in English. I don't think there is an English word for it. It's not a berry that exists in other parts of the world. I think it's just in India. So the cover when the fruit is ripe or the berry is ripe, the outside looks almost black and it's nice and shiny. It looks like how you do a saran wrap for something. It looks like that shiny, and when you eat it, it's got an astringent taste. Like it's not. It's not minty, but it's very astringent. Like it just wakes up your mouth, and you feel very fresh when you eat that, and your mouth turns purple, your tongue turns purple when you eat that, even your lips turn purple. So it used to be a lot of fun. I used to spend many pleasant days during the season, during the jamun season. We used to all be walking around under the jamun tree hunting for jamuns. And when they were completely ripe and then they fell, then they would fall and rupture a little. So we used to try to clean it and eat it. And those were the sweetest ones actually. But you had to be careful not to eat the mud. So you had to clean it off properly, and then your hands would also turn purple with the juice. um, and I remember once my mom usually stitched all our clothes. Everything was home stitched. So I remember once she had stitched a new frock for me. It was a beige frock, and I just got hold of the front of the frock and used it like a little bag to put a lot of jamuns in. And then that dress got stained and the stains never went. Then my mom told me not to put jamuns in my frock, and sometimes I used to carry a little baggie, to collect the jamuns. So that was the jamun tree. Then next to our building there was there was a well. So that was the bore well. I guess it was used for gardening and for those kind of purposes. That was not the drinking water. The drinking water came from the lakes. The municipality provided it. So the well, next to the well, there used to be it was a bush or a tree, I don't know what to call it, but it used to have such an interesting fruit. We used to call it imli. We used to call it the imli, and it had a green outside and a white inside, which was again quite an astringent, fresh tasting fruit that kind of just cleaned up your mouth, kind of woke up your mouth. And I have not seen it in too many other places. I've seen it in some places in Maharashtra. And when that fruit turns ripe, it becomes really fat, and the outside becomes almost pinkish in some places. And then the seeds inside turn black, and that's when the imli is really sweet. And if you take it when it's raw, then the outside is also quite green and thin, and then the seeds are also green, so that one won't be very sweet. And then there were some neem trees, there were all kinds of trees. And then there was a wooded area next to the manager's building. So that was very beautiful and interesting, and it used to be like an intriguing, mysterious place for us. Like later on, when we were reading mystery books and all, and we used to be like, oh, is there something? Is there some mystery over here? Is there something going on? Do we have to uncover some mystery over here? And I think one day when we were walking around in that wooded area, we saw a little structure which looked like a room, and we were like, oh, why is there a room here? It was probably just the nursery. There was a nursery over there. They used to keep plants and all of that. So it was probably the gardener's room or something, the garden shed. And we were all like intrigued. Oh, why is there this little room here? And we used to have little picnics in this wooded area. Each one of us would bring a little something from our house, and then just have a little picnic. And then I remember gathering twigs and kind of sweeping up that one space for the picnic. And then there used to be a lot of palm trees around, date palm trees, and then some of them had rocks near them. And then I was very fascinated by this, and I used to go and play on the rocks and pretend it was my home or my space. And some rocks had little ridges, or the tree had a little cut, and I would be like, oh, this is my shelf, and I would put little pebbles in that. I really enjoyed my time in Godrej hillside. And sometimes I used to pick up little pebbles and try to carve. I thought that's how you learned carving. Like I would pick up a smooth stone, I would pick up a sharp stone, and I would try to carve. So I had really interesting times at Godrej. It was a very pleasant time for me. And So in my building, I will tell you about a little bit about the neighbors. So on the ground floor, basically, I'll before telling you about who was on the ground floor, I'll tell you about the mix of people. So it was a very interesting mix of people over there, which you don't find in the usual places where you live. Later, wherever I lived, I never found such an interesting mix of people. So basically, the company Godrej being owned by Parsis, there were a lot of Parsis living around us, and then we had a lot of Anglo Indians living around us for some reason, and they have a very different approach to life, a different culture, different way of dressing. So that was very interesting for me to grow up among different people, not just the average, Hindu neighbors, which happened later. So we did have the Gujarati, Maharashtrian, we did have the Hindu neighbors also, the Muslim neighbors also, but then this was, I feel like an eclectic mix, a different mix of people. And then there's a typical way that these Anglo-Indian ladies dressed. The Parsi women and the Anglo-Indian women, there's a very peculiar, very unique kind of dress that only they get stitched. So I don't see other people who wear frocks, wearing them like that. So it's typically like a sleeveless, knee-length fitted frock. So that's very unique to these communities, the Parsi and the Anglo-Indian Catholic ladies community. I don't even know if people dress that way now, but at that time, almost all these ladies that I saw around me used to dress like that. So I'll tell you more about the neighbors and who was on which floor and all of that in the next episode. So for now, I will just tell you that my first impressions of Bombay were very favorable. I was fascinated. I started thriving. I loved it. I enjoyed my childhood in Bombay, and I felt like it was a growing experience compared to the Dapchari place where I used to sit in a class where I did not understand anything, and um, I felt this was a blossoming experience for me. Living in Godrej Hillside, I started blossoming. So I'll tell you more about this in the next episode. So that's all for now. And please do give a thumbs up if you like this episode. Please do subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed. And stay healthy, stay well. Bye for now, dear viewers. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.